Hey, sleepy listener. Welcome to Sleeping Podcast. Where in the world are you listening from? Let us know in the comments. And if you're ready to drift off, like and subscribe. And let's begin. Let me tell you about the night I wandered down to the quiet lake. It was a night wrapped in stillness, as if the whole world had paused to breathe, and I had been invited to walk slowly inside that breath. The air was soft, cool, and filled with a faint fragrance that drifted from somewhere unseen, perhaps from blossoms hidden in the dark, or perhaps from the damp sweetness of earth after a long day. I could not say for sure where the scent began, only that it lingered around me gently, like the hush of a memory. The trees stood silently on either side of the path, their leaves holding the moonlight in silver pools. When the breeze stirred them, they whispered in tones so quiet that they seemed meant only for the night itself. I felt no urgency, no reason to hurry. Each step was unhurried, each movement a soft unfolding of the evening. I let my body find its own rhythm, slow and easy, as if my footsteps were guided by the quiet pulse of the earth. The ground beneath me was firm, yet softened by the grass and fallen leaves. I noticed the way the cool blades brushed gently against my ankles, as if nature was reminding me to be here, to feel each step, each pause. The path curved ahead in shadows and moonlit glimmers, not asking me to go anywhere quickly, not promising any destination but the next small step forward. That was enough. The journey was not about arrival. It was about moving gently through the stillness, allowing the night to hold me. The air carried a hush, the kind of hush that makes you notice your own breathing. I became aware of the rise and fall of my chest, the slow rhythm of inhaling, then releasing, like waves touching the shore and slipping away again. With each breath, the world seemed to soften a little more. My shoulders released what they had carried. My body eased into the embrace of the night. I began to feel lighter as I invited you quietly to walk with me. Not in haste, not with the heavy steps of the day, but with the slow and careful movements that belong to the night. Together, we would walk through this gentle darkness, where even the shadows seemed kind and welcoming. The moon above us spread her light in a silver veil, softening the sharpness of the world, and every detail seemed touched by tenderness. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called softly, its voice a round note that faded into the trees. It was not startling, rather it was part of the music of the night, a quiet reminder that life continues gently, even when everything appears still. The silence was never empty. It was full of subtle sounds, the faint murmur of grass bending in the breeze, the tiny rustle of wings overhead, the soft shift of water somewhere far away. Each step seemed to guide me deeper into calm. I thought of how a pond, when left untouched, becomes smooth as glass, its surface reflecting everything above it. That was how my mind began to feel. Clear, steady, untroubled by any movement. The small ripples of thought softened and disappeared, leaving only this moment, this path, this quiet presence of night around me. I slowed my pace even more, letting the steps stretch out, one, then another. The distance between them filled with silence. My breath followed the same rhythm, expanding, releasing, lengthening. It felt as though time itself had slowed, as though there was no need to keep track of minutes or hours. The only time that mattered was now, the gentle unfolding of this peaceful walk. The faint fragrance of night flowers returned to me, drifting on the cool air. It was delicate, so delicate that I leaned into it without moving, letting it touch my senses like the brush of silk. I thought of how flowers bloom without effort, opening themselves quietly to the night, without asking to be seen. In that moment, I felt the same, open, present, not needing to do anything but exist here in the soft stillness. The trees arched above me, their branches swaying lightly. They seemed protective, not looming, but watchful, as if they were guardians of the path. The moonlight found its way through the spaces between the leaves, spilling onto the earth in pale, shifting shapes. I stepped into those shapes one by one, as though walking through pools of liquid light. With each step, the cool brightness touched me, and I felt closer to the calm heart of the night. I thought of how the day had carried its noise, its movement, its endless call to be busy, to be rushing somewhere. Yet here, none of that belonged. The night did not ask me for anything. It gave only silence, only space, only a quiet invitation to rest. And so I accepted, letting myself melt further into the pace of stillness. The air was fresh, but not sharp, the kind of coolness that clears the mind and soothes the body at once. I let it enter me with each breath, imagining it as a soft light moving inward, calming every corner of my being. With every exhale, I released the last fragments of worry, the scattered thoughts that belonged to the day. They slipped from me effortlessly, fading into the air behind me, leaving me freer, lighter, quieter. I looked upward. The sky stretched endlessly, stars scattered like grains of light across its vastness. They seemed to shimmer not with urgency, but with patient presence, glowing as they had for countless nights before this one, glowing as they would long after. I felt held by that eternity, comforted by the idea that the sky never rushed, never hurried, but always returned, night after night, to cover the world in its soft blanket of light. And so I walked on, slowly, each step a gentle rhythm, each breath a calming tide. The trees, the moon, the stars, the fragrance of flowers, all of them seemed to walk with me, not beside me, but within me, filling me with their quiet presence. Nothing needed to change. Nothing needed to happen. The only purpose was to be here, to move slowly, to breathe, to let the night itself become a cradle around me. The quiet lake waited somewhere ahead, though I did not need to rush toward it. The lake would not go anywhere, and the night would not shorten its embrace. I could take as long as I wished, one step at a time, through this path of stillness. Each moment was complete, whole, like a drop of water reflecting the entire sky. So I continued, unhurried, carrying only the rhythm of breath and the softness of night. The path, the air, the silence, the trees, everything came together in one gentle harmony. And in that harmony, I felt myself sinking deeper into peace, deeper into the quiet heart of the night, as though the world itself was lulling me gently toward rest. The path curved gently beneath my feet, winding like a quiet stream through the tall grass. Each step pressed softly into the earth, and I felt the coolness of smooth stones beneath my soles, steady and grounding. The grass leaned in around me, swaying as if to greet me with its gentle touch, brushing lightly against my legs, bending without resistance, then returning again to its upright stillness. It was as though the world had slowed to match my pace, every part of it moving with the same quiet rhythm. The moonlight filtered through the trees above, slipping between the branches in scattered fragments of silver. Wherever it touched, the ground glimmered faintly, as if the night itself had been sprinkled with light. I watched the way the glow moved over leaves, how it softened their edges, how it turned the ordinary into something delicate and dreamlike. Even the smallest details, the curve of a twig, the shimmer of dew resting on a blade of grass, seemed to glow with a calm presence. The trees whispered gently as the breeze moved through them, their branches swaying with a sound so soft it felt like a sigh. It was not the kind of sound that asked for attention, but one that folded itself into the silence. I let it wash over me, like a lullaby sung not to be noticed, but simply to be felt. The branches arched overhead in patterns that seemed timeless, like they had been cradling moonlight in this way for countless nights before. I paused for a moment to listen more deeply. The night had a language all its own, woven from rustling leaves, faint chirps of insects, and the far-off whisper of moving air. Nothing rushed, nothing competed. Every sound was gentle, unhurried, existing only to remind me that I was part of something vast and calm. Standing there, I felt that even my breath had joined in the song. I inhaled slowly, drawing in the cool night air. It was crisp, but soft, like water flowing into me, clearing the spaces inside that had felt crowded during the day. With each breath, something loosened. I exhaled, and with it went the scattered weight of small worries. They did not cling to me here. They had no place in this stillness. In the quiet of the night, they seemed smaller, almost transparent, dissolving the moment I let them go. The path wound ahead, and I followed it without any thought of where it led. There was no hurry in my steps. I moved as though the earth itself had slowed its turning, as though time had softened enough to allow me to linger in every moment. I noticed the way my foot met the ground, the shift of my body as I leaned into the next step, the way the air brushed against my skin with each movement forward. The moon followed me, sometimes hidden by the trees, sometimes revealing itself in full, casting a silver glow across the path. When the branches parted and the moonlight poured through, it was as if the world around me paused to bask in it, each leaf and stone catching the light for just a moment before releasing it again. I felt myself glowing too, bathed in that soft radiance, my body lighter beneath its touch. I thought of how, during the day, life often moves quickly, full of noise and demands. But here, under the moon, everything felt simple. The path, the trees, the cool air, the soft rhythm of breath. This was all that existed. And in that simplicity, there was peace. It was as though the night reminded me that I did not need to hold everything at once. I could set it down, let it drift away, and carry only this quiet presence with me. The more I walked, the deeper my breath became. Each inhale seemed to fill not only my lungs, but my whole being, reaching into every corner of myself that had felt tense. Each exhale was longer, slower, carrying away what I no longer needed to hold. The rhythm was steady, like waves arriving at the shore and slipping gently back again. I let that rhythm guide me, step after step, breath after breath, deeper into calm. The stones beneath my feet shifted from smooth to cool patches of soil, then back again to scattered pebbles. I noticed the subtle differences, how each texture grounded me differently. The earth itself seemed to remind me that I was supported, that I was safe, that every step was steady beneath me. There was comfort in that constancy, in the quiet strength of the ground that carried me forward. Above me, the branches of the trees swayed, their shadows stretching long across the path. I watched them ripple across the ground, slow-moving shapes that seemed to drift like water. The shadows and the light blended together so that I could not tell where one ended and the other began. It felt like a reminder that everything here flowed together, the light and the dark, the stillness and the motion, the silence and the soft sounds. Nothing was separate. It was all one. I was part of that wholeness. I slowed even more, as though my body wanted to linger in this part of the path. My steps became so gentle that it felt as though I were floating just above the ground. The night accepted my presence without resistance, without disturbance, as if it had always expected me to be here, moving quietly beneath the moon. A faint breeze touched my face, carrying with it the coolness of water somewhere nearby, though I had not yet reached the lake. It was a whisper of what awaited, the promise of stillness deeper still. I let the breeze move through me, as though it could sweep clean the spaces inside me where tension had lived. My thoughts, too, felt carried away on that breeze, lighter with each step, more spacious, more open. And so I walked on, unhurried, each footfall a soft note in the music of the night. The moonlight above, the shadows below, the whispering leaves around me, they all moved together in one gentle rhythm. My body moved within that rhythm too, slower, quieter, each breath deeper, each step softer. The path stretched forward, winding like a ribbon of silver through the grass and trees. I felt no need to see its end. The journey itself was enough. The act of walking beneath the moon, of breathing the cool night air, of letting my worries dissolve into the stillness. Everything was already whole, already complete, and with each step, I sank deeper into that completeness, deeper into the peace that awaited at the heart of the night. The path eventually opened before me, and I found myself at the quiet edge of the lake. The trees parted gently, as though stepping aside to reveal what they had been guarding all along. The world widened, and there before me stretched the water, vast and silent beneath the moon. I paused at once, as though stepping into a cathedral of stillness, where every sound, every movement was softened by reverence. The lake lay calm and unbroken, a silver mirror stretched out across the night. It reflected the moon above with such clarity that it seemed as though another sky had been placed upon the earth. The surface shimmered faintly, catching each fragment of starlight, holding them as though the heavens themselves had descended to rest in the water. I stood at its edge, unmoving, unwilling to disturb what seemed like perfection. The air here was different, carrying with it the coolness of the water, tinged with the damp, earthy scent of the shoreline. It was a fragrance that felt grounding, as though the earth itself was breathing softly. I inhaled deeply, letting that gentle scent settle within me. With it came a sense of belonging, a reminder that I was part of this quiet world, welcomed without effort, without question. The moon's glow lay upon the water in a broad path of silver light, stretching from one side of the lake to the other. It was not harsh or sharp, but soft, diffused, like silk spread across the surface. I followed it with my eyes, letting them drift along its length, until I lost myself in the endlessness of its reflection. The longer I gazed, the more it seemed that there was no separation between sky and lake, no boundary where one ended and the other began. At the edges of the water, reeds leaned gently, their slender forms swaying with the slightest movements of air. When the wind stirred them, they made a faint, rustling whisper that blended with the stillness rather than breaking it. From time to time, a single ripple spread outward from the reeds, moving across the lake in widening circles until it disappeared into silence once more. The ripples seemed like passing thoughts, appearing briefly, then dissolving back into calm. I watched those ripples for a long while, mesmerized by their fading patterns. Each one reminded me of how even the smallest disturbances in life eventually soften, fade, and return to stillness. No matter how far they spread, they are always absorbed back into the greater quiet. The lake was teaching me gently, without words, how to let go, how to trust that stillness always returns. Above me, the stars glittered, their reflections shimmering faintly on the water's surface. Some were sharp and bright, others faint, twinkling like whispers of light across the silver expanse. The sky itself seemed endless, and yet here it was, gathered so intimately in the lake before me. I felt as though I were standing at the edge of two worlds, the vast heavens above and their quiet twin below. I lowered myself slowly to the ground, sitting upon the cool earth near the water's edge. The grass here was damp, and the soil beneath it firm but yielding. I placed my hands upon the ground and felt its solidity, its quiet strength supporting me. It was grounding, anchoring me even as my mind drifted in the soft reflections of water and sky. The scent of damp earth rose more strongly here, mingling with the coolness of the lake. It was a smell both ancient and fresh, carrying with it the memory of rain, of roots of time itself, moving slowly beneath the surface. It was the scent of life returning again and again, no matter how many seasons had passed. Breathing it in, I felt as though I too were being renewed. My spirit softened and refreshed. A faint breeze moved across the lake, stirring its surface with the gentlest of motions. The path of moonlight shimmered, breaking into thousands of fragments that danced together in silence. Then, as the breeze faded, the lake returned once more to stillness, and the moon's reflection grew whole again. It was like watching the breath of the world, expanding, dispersing, then gathering itself back into calm. I let my eyes wander across the shoreline, noticing the small details that seemed to come alive under the moon. The curve of a stone glistening with moisture, the fine threads of spiderwebs stretched between reeds, the faint gleam of dew forming along the blades of grass. Everything was touched with silver, transformed into something luminous and dreamlike. Nothing here was ordinary. Every detail held the quiet beauty of night. For a time, I closed my eyes and simply listened. The water lapped faintly at the shore, no more than a whisper. Crickets sang in the grass, their rhythm steady, unchanging. An owl called once again from somewhere deeper in the trees, its voice low and round. Then silence followed. The night seemed vast, yet also tender, holding me gently within its sounds. With my eyes closed, I imagined the lake as an endless mirror, reflecting not only the sky above, but also the quiet within myself. Just as the surface held the moon, perhaps I too could hold this stillness, letting it shine through me. Thoughts would come like ripples, but they would fade again, leaving the surface clear. I felt myself becoming calmer with each breath, each passing moment. When I opened my eyes again, the lake remained unchanged, as though it had been waiting patiently. The moonlight still lay across it, the stars still shimmered, the reeds still swayed. I realized then that the night did not hurry. It moved in its own time, unhurried, eternal. And I, simply by being here, had been invited to share in that timeless rhythm. So I sat quietly, watching the water, breathing in its calmness. Every ripple that spread, every shimmer of light, every faint sound of the shore became part of a gentle rhythm that lulled me deeper into stillness. I felt as though I were being cradled by the night, held softly by the lake's reflection, soothed into peace. The world of the day felt far away now, distant and dim. Here at the edge of the lake, nothing was asked of me. Nothing was expected. There was only this moment, complete and whole, where water met sky, where earth met stillness, where I could rest. And so I remained there, on the cool earth, at the water's edge, gazing into the silver mirror of the lake, watching, breathing, resting, letting the night carry me deeper into its gentle embrace. Out on the silver expanse of the lake, I noticed a gentle motion. At first, it was no more than a soft shift of light, a ripple spreading ever so slightly across the mirrored surface. Then, from the shadows that held the far edge of the water, a shape began to drift forward. Slowly, steadily, it emerged, as though it had always been there, waiting for the right moment to appear. It was a swan, its feathers white as moonlight itself, gliding with a grace so quiet that it seemed untouched by the effort of movement. The bird floated across the surface, as though the water had chosen to carry it, as though it belonged not to the world of effort, but to the world of dreams. Its long neck curved in perfect arcs, and its body left only the faintest trail, ripples spreading out in circles that dissolved gently into stillness. I sat at the water's edge, transfixed by its presence. The swan seemed not to hurry, not to seek any destination. It moved simply for the sake of moving, each glide a continuation of the one before, each pause as complete as stillness itself. Watching it was like watching time slow into softness. The world beyond the lake fell away, and there was only this creature, this calm, this endless flow of moonlit motion. The moonlight touched its feathers, making them glow faintly against the darker waters. Every subtle tilt of its body sent ripples of light dancing outward. I found myself following those ripples with my eyes, watching how they spread wider and wider until they disappeared back into the silver calm. Each ripple was like a thought, brief, passing, fading. The swan itself remained serene, untouched, a center of stillness within the ever-changing surface. As I watched, I felt the bird's quiet solitude reach into me. There was no loneliness in its presence, only completeness. The swan needed nothing else to define its being. It drifted as part of the water, part of the night, whole and at ease. I thought of how often in life we seek company, sound, or distraction, and yet here, in this solitary presence, there was only peace. Solitude was not emptiness, it was fullness, a gentle kind of belonging to everything around. I let myself sink deeper into silence, listening to nothing but the faint lapping of water against the shore. Time slowed until it felt almost motionless, as though the swan had carried me with it into its calm rhythm. Each breath I took seemed to mirror its pace, long, smooth, without disturbance. I breathed in the cool night air, breathed out the remnants of the day, and allowed my body to soften as completely as the water that carried the swan. The swan's movements were hypnotic. Its wings folded neatly against its body, its head dipping every so often toward the surface in a slow, graceful bow. Then lifting again with a shimmer of droplets that caught the moonlight like tiny stars. Each gesture was unhurried, flowing into the next with a natural rhythm that never broke the stillness of the lake. I thought of stillness itself, not as something to force or achieve, but as something to allow. The swan did not create stillness. It simply moved within it, carried by it, embodying it. I realized that I, too, could be like that. I did not need to silence every thought, did not need to hold myself stiff with effort. I only needed to sit, to breathe, to let stillness hold me, the way the water held the swan. The longer I sat watching, the more my sense of time dissolved. Minutes or hours could have passed, and I would not have known the swan's rhythm became my own, a soft flow that stretched endlessly without beginning or end. Even my heartbeat seemed to align with it, steady, untroubled, slow. The night deepened around me, but it was not a darkness that pressed or confined. It was spacious, like a vast, gentle room with no walls. The lake shimmered within it, and the swan glided across that shimmer like a dream unfolding. Its white form drifted closer, though still at a distance, close enough that I could see the subtle motion of its feathers shifting with each breath. The closer it came, the more radiant it seemed, as though lit from within. The reeds at the edge of the lake swayed softly, brushing against one another, their faint sound almost like whispers. I imagined them whispering to the swan, welcoming it as it passed by, acknowledging its presence without need for words. The night itself seemed to do the same, holding the swan in its quiet embrace, offering it the same stillness it offered me. I felt my body mirrored the swan's calm. My shoulders lowered, my hands rested more heavily against the earth. My breath moved more freely. The swan's stillness was contagious, seeping into me until I no longer felt like an observer, but like part of the same rhythm, the same gentle unfolding. From time to time, the swan shifted direction, turning with the faintest ripple, as though responding to a current invisible to me. Its choices seemed effortless, unplanned, guided not by thought, but by flow. I admired that sense of trust, that surrender to the natural movement of water and air. There was no struggle, no need to control. The swan belonged entirely to this moment, to this drifting, to this peace. I sat in silence, letting its lessons settle within me. To drift softly, to trust the water, to rest within the night. These were not actions to be taken, but states to allow. The swan taught me without a word, simply by being what it was, present, graceful, unhurried. The moon overhead brightened, casting a broader glow across the water. Its light touched both the swan and me, binding us together in the same silver radiance. For a long while, I did not move. I simply watched, simply breathed, simply existed in this space where time slowed and stillness reigned. At the edge of the lake, with the swan drifting across the mirrored water, I felt myself drawn into a deeper calm than I had ever known. There was nothing to hold, nothing to chase, nothing to solve. There was only this moment, this stillness, this quiet companionship with the swan, the lake, the moon, and the night itself. And so I remained there, sitting in silence, letting the swan's graceful movements carry me deeper into stillness, deeper into the slow rhythm of the night, where everything was softened, everything was safe, everything was at peace. The swan drifted in slow circles upon the lake, its white body gliding as though the water itself desired to carry it gently along. Each turn was smooth and seamless, each movement sending out delicate ripples that spread in widening arcs across the silver surface. The moonlight stretched and bent within those ripples, breaking into soft fragments of light, then slowly gathering itself back together as the surface stilled again. Watching it was like watching breath, an endless rhythm of expansion and release, disturbance and calm, a steady return to silence. I followed the patterns with my eyes, tracing each ripple outward until it disappeared into the quiet expanse of the lake. It felt like gazing into time itself, the way moments come, expand, then fade, leaving only stillness behind. The swan was at the center of it all, a calm presence moving without urgency, reminding me that even motion could be part of stillness when it flowed. The sight stirred something gentle within me, memories rising like faint ripples from my own depths. I thought of rivers I had stood beside in years past, watching their waters flow endlessly onward, carrying with them the reflections of sky and leaf. I remembered the hush of mountain streams, their cool voices tumbling over stone, filling the air with sound that was both constant and calming. I remembered wide ponds where lilies floated motionless, and how even a dragonfly's touch on the surface sent circles outward that eventually softened back into peace. The memories did not rush upon me. They drifted slowly, one at a time, as if carried here by the same breeze that stirred the reeds along the lake's edge. Each one rose softly, lingered for a moment, then faded back into the stillness of my mind. I realized that thoughts were much like ripples, arising from some unseen center, spreading gently outward, then dissolving once again into the calm that had been there all along. I let those thoughts come and go without holding them. There was no need to reach for them, no need to keep them. They were part of the rhythm of the night, part of the flow that carried everything toward rest. One memory drifted in, the sound of water lapping against wooden boats tied at a quiet dock. Another followed, of sitting by a stream in the shade of willows, the leaves brushing the water as the current slipped by. Each image was soft, blurred at the edges, like a dream already half forgotten. As I let them pass through me, I noticed how my body responded. My breath grew slower still, rising and falling with the same patience as the ripples across the lake. My shoulders sank into ease, my hands resting heavily upon the cool ground, my eyes half-lidded, content to let the moonlit water hold my gaze without focus. Even my thoughts felt softened, their edges smoothed, as if they too had been washed by water. The swan circled once more, dipping its head gently toward the surface. Droplets shimmered and fell, each one sending tiny circles outward that vanished almost before they began. I thought of how every moment is like that, falling gently into the lake of life, rippling outward for a time, then dissolving into quiet. Nothing was ever lost. It was simply absorbed back into the stillness, into the vastness that holds everything. I repeated the image to myself, letting it settle, ripples fading, silence returning. Ripples fading, silence returning. With each repetition, I felt myself sink deeper into the rhythm, my mind aligning itself with the lake, with the swan, with the timeless calm of the night. The moonlight glowed softly on the water, unbroken except where the swan moved. It was like a silver fabric, smooth and seamless, disturbed only to reveal its beauty in shifting forms. I thought of how even when disturbed, the lake never lost its essence. Beneath the ripples, it was always whole, always still. So too I realized was the mind. Beneath thoughts, beneath worries, beneath passing memories, there is always a deeper calm, waiting, steady, unchanging. I let that realization drift through me like a feather carried on air. It did not arrive suddenly. It did not need to be grasped. It was simply there, quiet, reassuring, part of the night's lesson. The swan drifted closer for a moment, its white form glowing against the darkness. Its reflection stretched downward, wavering slightly with the water's gentle movement, as though there were another swan resting in the depths below. Together they formed a circle of presence, one above, one mirrored beneath, endless in their symmetry. I sat in silence, watching them, feeling time dissolve completely. Another memory rose faintly, the sound of rain tapping against windows late at night, the way drops formed rivulets that ran downward, merging, joining, then disappearing. That too had been calming, a kind of water song that eased me into sleep. The memory touched me, then faded again, leaving only the present silence, only the soft rhythm of ripples. Again and again, thoughts came and went, each dissolving like moonlight upon water. They carried no urgency, no weight, no demand. They were simply part of the rhythm of being, nothing more. I welcomed them, then let them pass, just as the lake welcomed each ripple and then restored itself to stillness. I whispered within myself, not in words spoken aloud, but in a gentle rhythm of thought. Let it come, let it go. Let it come, let it go. The words grew slower, softer, until they too began to dissolve, leaving only the rhythm, only the quiet. The swan circled again, slower this time, as though it too were drifting into deeper rest. Its path was wide, unhurried, graceful. The ripples it left behind stretched outward faintly, then faded once more into the mirror of the lake. Watching this repetition, I felt myself slipping into a trance of calm. Each circle, each ripple, each fading silence became part of a lullaby, a song without words that the night itself was singing. The stars above twinkled gently, their reflections trembling in the ripples, then stilling when the water returned to calm. It was as if the sky itself was breathing through the lake, inhaling and exhaling with the swan's movement, with the rhythm of the night. I breathed with them, part of that vast cycle, part of that endless stillness. Time no longer mattered. The lake, the swan, the moon, and I were all woven together in one quiet fabric. Nothing began, nothing ended. There was only this flow, this repetition, this softness. And so I remained, seated at the water's edge, watching the swan's circles, watching the ripples spread and fade, watching thoughts rise and dissolve. Every moment brought me deeper into calm, deeper into the rhythm of stillness. Each repetition was softer than the last, guiding me further inward, further into rest. The swan drifted farther into the stillness, and my eyes, almost of their own accord, rose upward. Above me, suspended in the quiet vastness of the night, the moon shone in its fullness. It hung there like a patient guardian, a steady companion who had watched countless evenings such as this one pass in silence. Its glow was soft, silver, and unhurried, and as I gazed at it, I felt the weight of the world loosen gently, as though even gravity had grown kind. The moonlight spread outward in all directions, touching everything with its calm presence. It washed across the surface of the lake, turning the water into a great mirror of light. It touched the swan, turning its feathers into a luminous drift of white upon silver. It reached the reeds at the water's edge, the soft blades shining faintly like strands of glass. And then, tenderly, it touched me too. I felt it upon my shoulders, upon my hands resting quietly in my lap, upon the crown of my head. It was as though the night itself had wrapped me in a cool, radiant cloak. I breathed in, and the breath seemed to gather the silver glow, pulling it softly into me. I breathed out, and I felt that same glow spread back into the night, as if my own rhythm were now part of the moon's endless tide. Each breath rose like a wave, gentle and full, lifting me toward the sky. Each breath fell like a wave, settling me back into stillness. Over and over, rising and falling, a slow rhythm that carried me deeper into peace. The moon had always been there, I realized, silent, steady, unchanging through the years. It had shone upon nights of joy, upon nights of sorrow, upon countless evenings forgotten. And still it shone now, the same as before, unchanged in its patience. I thought of all the generations that had looked up at this very light, the countless eyes that had rested upon its glow, shepherds in distant fields, Travelers on long roads, children falling asleep in warm rooms, all had known this same gentle moon. It gave a feeling of eternity, of a presence that could not be hurried or altered. The trees might shift with the seasons, the waters might rise and fall. My own life might change in ways too many to count. But above all of it, the moon remained. To rest beneath its light was to rest beneath something eternal, something beyond the noise of days and the passing of years. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the glow filter through my eyelids, soft and warm, a muted silver warmth. My breath kept its slow rhythm, rising like the tide, falling like the tide. With each inhale, I felt my chest expand, gentle and steady. With each exhale, I felt a release, as if every small weight, every small worry was flowing out into the vastness of night, too light to remain with me. When I opened my eyes again, the moon was there still, patient and unmoved, as though no time had passed at all. The swan floated across its reflection, scattering it into long, shimmering paths of light, then letting them slowly mend themselves again. The water, the air, the swan, myself, we were all drawn into the same still rhythm, each of us touched by the moon's calm radiance. I thought then of the word forever, not as something long and unreachable, but as something already here, already present in the moonlight. This glow had no beginning, no end. It was simply here, steady, luminous, eternal. And for a moment, I felt that same eternity within myself, beneath the movements of breath and thought, beneath the ripples of memory and time. There was something steady, something endless, a quiet light of being. The breeze softened, carrying the faint scent of earth and water. And even that seemed to move in rhythm with the moon. Every sound had slowed. The faint rustle of leaves, the whisper of grasses, the occasional ripple of water. They were not interruptions. They were part of the night's breathing, part of the great tide that flowed through everything. I let my own breath grow even slower, each inhale a gentle lifting, each exhale a gentle release. The rhythm carried me, as though I were a leaf upon water, rising and falling with the tide, needing no effort, no thought. My body felt lighter, as though the moonlight itself were holding me upright, keeping me steady. My thoughts, too, grew lighter, thinning out like mist touched by dawn. The moon seemed to draw nearer, though I knew it had not moved. Its presence filled the whole of the sky, and its reflection filled the lake, so that everywhere I turned, there was only silver, only stillness, only light. I breathed with it, a part of its vast rhythm. No separation at all between myself and the night. Another breath, rising, falling. Another wave, rising, falling. The rhythm slowed further, deepened further, until I felt as though I were no longer breathing at all, but simply being breathed by the night itself. The swan moved again, so slowly it was as if it were floating in a dream. The wake it left shimmered faintly, then melted into silver. The lake accepted it. The moon blessed it. The air held it. Everything was part of the same great stillness, the same eternal glow. Time had no meaning here. The moon was not of hours or minutes. It was of eternity, of presence, of now. And so I let go of time as well. There was no need for counting, no need for measuring. There was only the glow upon the water, the glow upon the swan, the glow upon my own still body. In the quiet of that moment, I felt as though I too had become a reflection upon the lake, a shimmering presence touched by moonlight, rippling gently, then fading softly back into calm. I was not separate from the water, not separate from the sky, not even separate from the moon. All was one endless tide of silver light, breathing, resting, eternal. And so I sat, bathed in moonlight, breathing as the waves breathe, as the earth breathes, as the night breathes. Each breath carried me deeper into rest, deeper into the rhythm of stillness. The moon above glowed on, unchanged, unchanging, eternal. Its silver light a promise that calm would always remain. I lowered myself slowly onto the grass at the lake's edge, letting the cool earth receive my weight with quiet patience. The blades bent softly beneath me, springy and alive, and I felt the dampness of dew beginning to form, a delicate coolness against my palms. The ground was neither hard nor unwelcoming. It seemed to shape itself gently to me, as if it had been waiting for this moment, for my stillness to join its own. I leaned back, my body cradled by the earth, my breath matching the slow rhythm of the night. Around me, the world hushed into deeper layers of quiet. It was not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of fullness, where every faint sound carried its own tender presence. The crickets sang their steady notes, a gentle pulse that threaded through the darkness, like a lullaby without beginning or end. Somewhere farther off, an owl called, its voice low and resonant, drifting across the water and fading into the trees. Between their voices came the softest whisper, the tiny laps of water against the shore, each one vanishing almost as soon as it arrived. The longer I listened, the more these sounds grew into a rhythm, as though the night itself were breathing, inhaling with the song of insects, exhaling with the owl's distant call. My own breath fell into step with this rhythm, deepening without effort. Each inhale a slow gathering of cool night air, each exhale a gentle release. The grass beneath me felt alive, not simply a resting place, but 1,000 tiny threads of the earth, supporting me in their own quiet way. My fingers brushed across the blades, cool and smooth, some damp with dew, others dry and feather light. Each touch reminded me of the stillness that surrounded me, an endless patience that belonged not to me alone, but to everything here. The lake, the trees, the sky, they were all sitting in the same stillness, all breathing with me. Time began to lose its edges. Moments no longer felt like separate beads, but rather like drops of water slipping into one another, flowing into a single stream of calm. I felt no need to measure anything, no need to move, no need to think beyond this very breath, this very sound. Words themselves seemed to grow slower, softer, dissolving into spaces between thoughts, until the night held me as though I were a child again, as though its arms were vast and endless, wrapping me in a safety too large to ever be broken. I could almost feel its presence around me, not as something seen, but as something known. A vast quietness that carried me deeper into rest. Every cricket's song, every rustle of leaf, every distant ripple on the water seemed like a heartbeat of that presence, reminding me that I was not apart from the night, but within it, belonging wholly to its stillness. My body softened further into the ground. Shoulders loosened, hands opened, breath slowed. Even the space behind my eyes began to feel lighter, as though the weight of thought had been set gently aside. I did not need to search for silence. It had already found me, filling every corner of my being with its calm light. The owl called again, low and steady. Its voice lingered in the air, then melted into the distance. The crickets carried on, unending, as though they had always sung and always would. Between those voices, I heard the faint stirring of leaves, the brush of a breeze moving so softly, it seemed not to pass through the trees, but to rest in them, as though pausing for sleep. I breathed again, slow and deep, feeling the night air cool within me, feeling it release without sound. Each breath was a gentle tide, carrying me deeper inward, yet outward too, until there was little difference between where I ended and the night began. The stillness was not empty. It was full, endlessly full. It was as though the earth itself was listening, as though the stars above were leaning close, as though the lake, in its silence, was whispering a promise of peace. I felt myself held by all of it, as though countless hands of light and darkness cradled me together, steady and unhurried. Even thought began to dissolve into the stillness. I felt words drift away, like leaves floating down a stream, carried off into silence. What remained was only the sense of being, soft, unshaken, held. My mind no longer pressed forward into the next moment. It simply rested, like a swan upon still water, like the moon within its endless sky. Another breath, another wave, rising, falling, rising, falling. The longer I sat, the more it felt as though I was not sitting by the night, but sitting within it, as though the stillness had expanded to hold me completely. There was no boundary between my body and the earth, between my breath and the air, between my stillness and the vast hush around me. It was all one quiet presence, all one endless rest. I let myself surrender into it, without effort, without thought. The grass beneath me, the sounds around me, the cool air upon my skin. All of it held me like a gentle cradle, swaying not at all, perfectly still. In this stillness, I felt safe. In this stillness, I felt whole. And as I breathed once more, slower still, I knew there was nothing left to do but rest. Rest within the night. Rest within its embrace. Rest within this eternal quiet that asked for nothing, yet gave everything. The swan glided slowly across the surface of the water, its movements softer now, as though the weight of the night was gently guiding it towards stillness. The wide stretch of the lake shimmered faintly with the moon's reflection, silver light stretching and folding upon itself. But in one corner, where the reeds gathered thick and dark, the water looked deeper, calmer, as if it had chosen a place to rest. The swan turned that way, drifting without effort, its wings folding closer to its body in a gesture of ease, of letting go. I watched as the great white form grew quieter, its neck curving in a slow, graceful arc, the last ripples fading behind it. The air seemed to hold its breath as the swan approached the shadows of the reeds. And then, with a subtle shiver of wings, it stilled completely. Its body became one with the reflection of the moon, a white flame glowing softly upon the dark surface, not moving, not reaching, only being. Something within me mirrored that motion. I felt my own body folding inward, softening, as though the swan's calm had reached me across the water. My shoulders released the last threads of tension. My breath flowed more gently, and even the quiet weight of my head seemed to sink closer to the earth. The swan rested, and I rested with it, as though we were joined in a silent pact of stillness. From where I sat, I could see the delicate rhythm of its breathing. The rise and fall was so faint that I might have missed it, if not for the way the moonlight shimmered with each soft motion. A slow expansion, a gentle release, again and again, unhurried, unbroken. Watching it was like listening to the rhythm of a lullaby, a song without sound, carried only by the presence of rest. The lake itself responded, smoothing out into a flawless mirror. No breeze touched the surface now, no ripple lingered. The water seemed to lean toward the swan, to cradle it in a hush of silver stillness. Even the reeds around its resting place grew perfectly still, their thin leaves rising upright as though honoring the peace that had gathered here. I closed my eyes for a moment and allowed my breath to join the swan's, imagining that I too was floating on that gentle surface, each inhale like a feather settling, each exhale like a ripple fading into silence. My chest rose slowly, fell slowly, the rhythm becoming less mine and more the night's. With each breath, I drifted closer to that sense of belonging, of being held, of sharing this soft quietness. When I opened my eyes again, the swan had not moved. It was so serene, so perfectly placed, that it seemed less like a creature of the earth and more like a dream upon the water. Its stillness was not emptiness, it was fullness, a a complete surrender to rest. I felt the edges of my thoughts soften as I watched, the way a candle flame leans and stretches before dissolving into air. There was a companionship in this moment, though no word had been spoken, no sound exchanged. The swan did not need to acknowledge me, and yet I felt its presence deeply, as though we shared some quiet language of breath and stillness. I felt close to it, not in body, but in spirit, joined in this fragile yet infinite calm. The moonlight wrapped around both of us, a soft shawl of silver. It poured over the swan's white feathers, turning them almost luminous, and it brushed across my own skin, cool and steady. The light seemed to hold us both equally, without difference, without division. It was as though the lake, the swan, and I were all part of one single stillness, each of us a reflection of the same quiet peace. My body grew heavier with each passing moment, sinking more deeply into the grass beneath me. My arms felt weightless, as though they no longer needed to hold themselves. My legs softened into the earth, the ground supporting me as gently as water supports a drifting feather. My breath continued in its slow rhythm, the air cool and kind as it entered, warm and easy as it left. I thought of nothing beyond this shared rest, the swan upon the water and I upon the shore. No need to move, no need to seek. The night itself seemed to whisper that rest was enough, that stillness was all that was needed. Every sound around me had softened, the crickets now like a faint pulse in the distance. The owl's voice quieted, the lake almost silent. The swan remained a vision of peace, its head gently tucked, its body swaying ever so slightly with the invisible motion of water. It seemed to breathe not just for itself, but for the night, for me, for everything that lingered in the hush. In that shared rhythm, I felt myself slipping deeper into ease, as though the boundaries of my body were dissolving, and I too was becoming a part of the lake's quiet reflection. I let my eyes close again, and in the darkness behind them, I could still see the swan, white upon silver, still upon stillness, luminous upon the dark. Its image floated in my mind like a gentle flame, soothing, steady. My thoughts became fewer, lighter, dissolving into that one simple picture. In this place, in this moment, companionship required nothing more than being. The swan rested, I rested. The lake held us both, and in that circle of stillness, I felt the whole night breathe with me, unhurried, eternal. The night was deep and soft when a faint breeze stirred across the lake. I felt it first on my skin, a cool brush of air against my cheek, and then I saw it on the water, where the perfect mirror of silver began to shift. At first, the ripples were so small that they seemed no more than whispers, a faint trembling of the moon's reflection. But slowly, gently, they widened, spreading out in long, graceful arcs that traveled across the surface until they thinned and disappeared into stillness once more. I sat quietly, watching this tender dance, and it seemed to me that the lake was breathing, just as I was, just as the swan was, in its hidden place of rest. A soft inhale, a gentle stirring, and then the release back into silence. Nothing hurried, nothing forced, only the effortless rhythm of movement, returning to calm. The ripples fascinated me. They seemed to rise from nothing, shimmer with life, and then dissolve, leaving the water as smooth as before. I thought of how many thoughts in my mind had been the same. Tiny stirrings, ideas, memories, fleeting worries, all arriving without asking, spreading for a moment, then fading again into stillness. No matter how wide they seemed, no matter how strong, they always melted back into the quiet. Watching the ripples reminded me that nothing need be clung to. Each wave passed on its own. Each tremor of the water carried itself away. And just so, each thought, each memory, each breath, too, was only passing through. The night itself seemed to teach me. There was no need to hold, no need to grasp. Everything belonged to the motion of appearing, widening, softening, and returning to silence. I let my mind drift in time with those waves. A thought would surface, perhaps of a path I once walked, or of a voice I once heard. And I would see it, like a ripple spreading across my inner water. Then, without my asking, it would thin, stretch, and vanish, leaving me emptier, clearer. Another would come, gentle, light, a memory of faces or skies, and it too would dissolve. Again and again, the rhythm repeated, until I trusted it fully. I no longer tried to control what came or what left. I only watched as I watched the lake, certain that stillness would return, certain that peace was never truly gone. The breeze grew softer still, until it was nothing more than a sigh over the water, a cool caress through the reeds. The ripples became slower, longer, so faint they seemed like threads of silver light weaving across the surface. The moon's reflection stretched and bent, then gathered itself back into a clear circle, filling myself with the same ease, the same gentle assurance that nothing could disturb the stillness for long. I thought of how the moon had always shone like this, across countless nights, through countless lives. No ripple had ever dimmed it, no wave had ever erased its glow. And perhaps my own being was the same, something steady and eternal beneath the changing surface of ripples. Each thought, each breath, each fleeting feeling might bend and stretch me for a time, but beneath it all, I too was clear and luminous, resting in silence. I leaned back onto the grass, my body sinking deeper into the earth, my gaze still fixed upon the shifting lake. The movement of the water and the stillness that always followed became one, inseparable, like the rise and fall of my breath. A ripple was not apart from the calm. It was simply the calm in motion. And so, even when my mind stirred with thoughts, I felt no distance from peace. It was all part of the same whole. The sound of the water was faint, almost hidden, like the softest of whispers. The grass around me swayed gently in the breeze, brushing together with the sound of silk. The night wrapped itself more closely around me, and I felt as though I were floating. Not on the grass, not even on the shore, but within the wide embrace of the lake itself. My body as light as one of the ripples moving outward. My spirit as quiet as the stillness that followed. Time felt slower, stretched thin and luminous, like moonlight itself. Each breath took longer. Each thought came with more space around it, until even thoughts became no more than faint glimmers, small movements upon an infinite surface. I did not need to hold them, for they passed as easily as ripples fade. I did not need to seek stillness, for stillness was already here, waiting after each wave, waiting beneath every breath. I let my eyes soften, barely open, as if I too were dissolving into the reflection of the moon. The lake's gentle rhythm moved through me, teaching me again and again, nothing to grasp, nothing to lose, only this moment, flowing and fading, endlessly returning to calm. The swan was still hidden in its resting place, unseen but present in its quietness. I imagined its breathing, steady and slow, like the tide within the reeds. Perhaps it too felt the ripples. Perhaps it too knew that each one was part of the lake's eternal ease. I smiled softly in the dark, comforted by the thought of its company, of our shared belonging in this still and tender night. The ripples grew fewer now, smaller, until the water was whole again, seamless, complete. The moon shone clearly, steady as a guardian, steady as a dream, and in its glow, I felt my own thoughts dissolve into quiet. My own breath. The night deepened around me with a gentleness that felt almost endless. The sky, which had been a soft silver blue, now stretched darker, carrying within it 1,000 quiet stars. At first, they appeared shy, small glimmers at the edge of vision. But with each passing moment, more revealed themselves, scattering across the heavens, until the sky seemed infinite, a vast field of light stitched upon shadow. The air cooled as the hours unfolded. I felt it brush across my skin like the touch of water, soft and tender, easing every line of my body into greater stillness. Each breath carried this coolness inward, and with every exhale, I gave something back. Warmth released, weight surrendered, until I was lighter, emptier, as though the night were slowly drawing me into its own calm embrace. The sounds of the earth softened too, as if the world itself was lowering its voice. Crickets chirped less often, their notes stretched with pauses between them, long enough for silence to gather like mist. The occasional rustle of leaves became rarer, smaller, until they seemed no more than memories of movement. Even the lake, which had carried ripples not long ago, returned to perfect quiet, as though the water too wished to rest, unbroken, complete. I sank further into the grass, the ground beneath me cool and steady, like the earth was offering me its strength without asking for anything in return. The softness of moss and leaves cradled my body, and I felt no need to move, no urge to rise. Each limb grew heavier in the most comforting way, not with burden, but with release. My body was giving itself to rest, little by little, moment by moment, until I was as still as the stones at the edge of the shore. The stars above seemed to pulse faintly, though I knew it was only my eyes softening, my mind growing slower. I welcomed the illusion. It made the night feel alive, as if the sky itself were breathing with me. With each inhale, the stars shimmered brighter. With each exhale, they softened, glowing gently, as though they too were easing into the rhythm of sleep. Time thinned into something wider, softer, immeasurable. The spaces between moments lengthened, like long threads of silence woven through the air. My thoughts followed that same slow rhythm. They stretched, unhurried, until they dissolved altogether, leaving only the sensation of being, of resting. Nothing pressed forward, nothing pulled behind. Only now remained, deep, wide, infinite as the sky. The night felt like a blanket laid over me, cool on its surface, but warm beneath. A paradox of comfort that wrapped around my whole being. It was not heavy, not stifling, but perfectly balanced, protective, sheltering, endless. I felt covered by it, hidden within its folds, safe in the knowledge that nothing needed to disturb me. Nothing could intrude. Above, the moon shone steadily, its glow now softer, as if even its brilliance was dimming in kindness, so as not to wake what had fallen quiet. Around it, the stars stretched outward in every direction, so many and so constant that it seemed they had always been there, watching, waiting for this very stillness. I thought of how small I was beneath them, and yet, rather than loneliness, the feeling was of belonging, of being held within something so vast that nothing could ever fall outside its care. I breathed in again, slowly, filling myself with the coolness of night air. It moved through me like water, soothing, cleansing, leaving nothing behind but ease. With each exhale, I felt my body soften further, as though the air were carrying away what little tension remained, leaving me open, loose, and quiet. Even my heartbeat felt slower, echoing the rhythm of the night itself. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting darkness gather fully. Behind my eyelids, I saw only soft glimmers, faint sparks like those of the stars above, drifting across a vast inner space. I lingered there, between sight and sleep, between awareness and dream. I felt no hurry to decide, no urge to open or to close myself completely. The night carried me, and I needed only to drift. The grass held me, the earth beneath supported me, and the sky spread wide above me, endless and tender. All of it together felt like a lullaby without sound, a presence without words, whispering in a language I could not hear but understood deeply. It told me there was nothing to fear, nothing to do, nothing more than this resting, this quiet, this peace. And so I let myself go further, deeper, softer, until even the stars seemed to blur, until the cool air became part of me, until the night itself was not outside, but within, woven into every breath, every thought, every beat of my resting heart. The night was deepening, and I was deepening with it, folding into its endless blanket, carried further into stillness, into silence, into rest. The lake before me began to take on a softer glow, as though its surface were not water at all, but a quiet pool where dreams themselves had gathered to rest. The silver light of the moon lay upon it like a veil, and beneath that veil, I felt shapes begin to rise, not with any haste, not with clarity, but in the slow, drifting rhythm of imagination half-born. It was as though the water became a canvas for the gentlest of visions, each one appearing only long enough to float by before dissolving again into the wide stillness. At first, I thought I saw a single feather, pale as snow, turning slowly as it drifted across the mirrored surface. It caught the moonlight in a way that made it shimmer faintly, almost glowing, until it disappeared into a ripple that spread and softened back to calm. Then another came, 2 feathers, then 3, falling not from the sky, but rising from the dream water itself, like breath exhaled from its depths. Soon I imagined lanterns, small and round, their light dim but warm, gliding across the stillness. They did not burn like fire. Instead, they glowed with the color of candlelight, remembered, the color of safety, of home. Each one hovered a moment, then drifted toward the far edges of the lake, like thoughts that visit the mind for a while before fading into sleep. Their reflections doubled their glow, and for a while, the whole lake seemed sprinkled with these wandering lights, fragile and soft, never disturbing the silence. The water shifted again, and I saw the faint outline of clouds, low and weightless, floating not in the sky, but across the silver mirror of the lake. They moved so slowly, it was hard to tell if they moved at all, their edges dissolving into one another, just as dreams do when they change shape without notice. They carried no storm, no shadow, only the promise of drifting, endless drifting, with no place they needed to arrive. The swan moved gently through this dream water, as though it too were a part of the vision. Its body glided past the feathers, through the lantern light, beneath the drifting clouds, and each time it passed, the images bent and rippled, as though bowing to its grace. Yet none of them broke, none resisted. They allowed themselves to shift, to soften, to dissolve, as though they too belonged to the rhythm of the swan's slow journey. I felt that in its presence, the dream shapes were not disturbed, but guided, finding new patterns, new stillness in its wake. As I watched, the lake no longer seemed bound by its shores. The dream shapes spread further and further, until they surrounded me, until I felt as though I too was floating within this pool of visions. I let the feathers pass across my skin, as light as a sigh. I let the lanterns glow within me, filling me with their warmth, a warmth that asked for nothing but rest. I let the cloud. Time slowed even more here, until it seemed there was no past, no future, only this soft unfolding. My breathing matched it. Each inhale, a lantern appearing. Each exhale, a cloud dissolving. I felt my thoughts taking on the same shape. Light, fleeting, harmless. Each one arrived softly, like a feather drifting down, and then vanished just as softly, leaving only the vast openness of the lake. I invited myself, and anyone listening with me, to sink into these images as though into sleep itself, to let the feathers gather in their imagination, white and soft, until they no longer needed to count or to notice them, to let the lanterns glow inside the chest, a warm pulse of calm that spread through every limb, heavy and safe, to let the clouds roll slowly over their mind until every thought was muffled, wrapped in cotton-like stillness. The Swan, now barely moving, became almost indistinguishable from the water around it. It was as though it had dissolved into the dream itself, not apart from it, but part of its fabric. I felt the same happening within me. The boundaries between myself and the water, the images and the night, grew thin, as though all of it belonged to one single breath, one single resting body. I let go of the need to hold the images steady, knowing they would shift, knowing they would fade. Dreams never stay in one shape, yet their passing is never loss. They change as the water changes, always flowing, always returning to stillness. And in that understanding, I rested deeper, trusting that even as the shapes dissolved, something quiet and gentle would always rise again, something new and soft to carry me further inward. The lake of dreams held me. The feathers and lanterns and clouds moved through me, and the swan guided me wordlessly toward rest. All that remained was stillness, drifting, safe. I became aware, slowly and quietly, of the weight of my own body, as though the lake's stillness had settled not only upon the water, but also within me. My breathing had grown slower, deeper, moving in long waves that rose and fell without urgency. Each inhale arrived like a soft tide, touching the shore, and each exhale drifted away like ripples dissolving into silence. With every breath, my body seemed to sink further into the night's gentle embrace. The grass beneath me was cool, soft, and steady. I could feel its tender threads meeting the shape of my back, my arms, my legs, as though each blade knew how to hold me in comfort. The earth below that grass was firmer, grounding, unshakable. Its presence reminded me that I was safe, supported, and carried without effort. I did not need to hold myself up, for the ground itself was cradling me. My limbs began to feel heavier, though not in a way that burdened me. Instead, it was a heaviness of rest, like stones sinking gently to the bed of a river, like leaves coming to lie quietly on the forest floor. My arms rested more deeply by my sides, the fingers loosening, as if they had been holding something but no longer needed to. My legs softened, the muscles unwinding, until they too felt like part of the earth that welcomed them. I noticed how my shoulders sank, releasing the subtle tension that so often lingers unnoticed. They eased downward, as though melting into the grass, finding a place where they no longer needed to lift or carry. My chest rose and fell in the rhythm of the night, each breath slower than the last, as though my body itself had learned the stillness of the Swan, the calm of the moonlit water. Even my face softened, my expression faded into neutrality, neither smile nor frown, only rest, as if my features had joined the silence of the night. I felt the weight of my body not as a burden, but as an anchor, keeping me close to this peaceful earth. Heaviness spread gently, warmly, like sand filling a vessel, like dusk filling the horizon. With it came a sense of surrender, of no longer needing to move quickly or think sharply. Every part of me was allowed to slow, to soften, to be carried. I imagined this heaviness as a kind of blessing, flowing down through me from head to toe, touching each part with permission to rest. It began in my crown, a soft awareness spreading downward across my face, over my throat, into my chest. From there, it drifted into my arms, through my hands, down into my fingertips, where it lingered before finally dissolving. Then it spread again, heavy with calm, until even the breath that passed through seemed to weigh me more deeply into stillness. My legs, too, received this quiet weight. My thighs grew warm and settled, my knees loosened, and my calves seemed to melt toward the grass. My feet, so often carrying me through the day, now rested completely, their work done, each toe relaxing as though floating in the dark lake. The entire body had become a single slow current, no longer pulled upward or outward, but gently sinking inward, toward peace. The heaviness was not a closing, but an opening, a letting go. In its quiet pull, I found release, release of effort, of holding, of all that was not needed now. The earth accepted what I released, without judgment, without question, as though it had been waiting all along to carry this weight for me. I invited anyone drifting beside me in spirit to notice their own body, as I noticed mine, to feel how the breath has already grown slower, how the limbs have already softened, to allow the grass beneath them or the surface they rest upon to cradle their body in the same way, to trust in the heaviness, not as something that pulls down, but as something that steadies, comforts, and holds them gently to the world. We often resist this heaviness, I thought. In the brightness of day, we lift ourselves, move ourselves, carry ourselves. But here, in this quiet night, beneath this moon, it is safe to let go, safe to sink into the ground, to be a body at rest, to belong to stillness. The swan across the lake seemed to mirror this surrender. Its wings folded, its head bowed, floating without effort. The lake itself mirrored it too, holding every reflection without strain, simply receiving. I felt myself joining that same harmony, as though my body were no longer separate from the grass, the earth, the lake, the sky. Heaviness dissolved into belonging, and belonging dissolved into peace. The weight of my body was no longer something to notice, but something to become. In its depth, I felt a soft silence rise, a silence that carried me further inward, toward rest, toward dreams, toward sleep. A soft wind moved across the surface of the lake, so gentle I hardly noticed it at first. Only when the reeds at the water's edge began to stir did I realize that the night had exhaled a breath of its own. The stalks bent ever so slightly, their thin blades brushing against one another with a sound like the faintest whisper. It was not sharp or sudden. It was long, drawn out, like a lullaby sung by the air itself. The sound lingered, then faded, and then returned again, each time softer, each time slower. The breeze touched the water, and the surface shimmered in a way that seemed almost dreamlike. Tiny ripples stretched outward, spreading in circles before dissolving again into stillness. The moon's reflection wavered gently, as if sighing, as if it too was being carried by the soft current of the air. Each ripple stretched, faded, and was gone, only to be followed by another, then another, each gentler than the last. I let the sound of the reeds return to me again. Their swaying was like a secret spoken into the night, not meant to be heard by anyone but those who were already listening closely. They whispered of calm, of ease, of the slow turning of the hours. Every note lingered in the air longer than seemed possible, a delicate thread connecting me to the rhythm of the breeze. I listened once, twice, and again, until it felt as though the whisper had become a part of me. The sound of the air was no longer outside me. It moved through me too. I could feel the breeze brushing over my skin, cool and tender, like a hand resting for just a moment before withdrawing. It touched my cheeks, drifted across my arms, slipped over my legs where they rested on the grass. Each place it passed grew quieter, as if hushed, as if lulled into deeper rest. I breathed with it, slowly, letting each inhale arrive with the same rhythm as the wind. My chest rose with the passing of the breeze and fell when it moved on, like I was breathing not only air, but the night itself. Again and again it came, softer with each return, as though it was inviting me to follow it further into stillness. The reeds continued to murmur, bending and rising, their voices weaving in and out like strands of a single lullaby. I heard them repeat their song, almost the same, yet each time a little slower, a little more hushed, until their whispers felt like echoes of themselves, like a memory of sound, rather than sound itself. Even the trees beyond the lake seemed to sway in response, their leaves answering the reeds with faint rustlings, as if the entire night was speaking in a language of soft repetition. The more I listened, I returned again to the water, watching the ripples spread and fade. They looked almost identical each time, and yet each carried its own subtle difference. I noticed them once, then again, until they no longer felt like something to see, but like something to fall into, a motion that drew me deeper into the calm. The swan, too, seemed to listen. It floated motionless, its wings folded close, and yet I could imagine that it also felt the passing of the breeze, that it too heard the whispers in the reeds. Its stillness mirrored my own, and together we belonged to the quiet world shaped by the wind. I thought of how often a breeze like this has crossed the lake, how many nights it has whispered through the same reeds, and yet, tonight, it felt as though it was moving for the very first time, just for me, just for this moment. The thought arrived slowly, lingered, and then slipped away. Like everything else in this night, I let myself hear the lullaby again. The reeds bent, whispered, lifted, whispered again. The ripples stretched outward, faded, returned. The wind passed across my skin, over and over. Always the same, always gentler. With each return, the sound grew quieter, the movement softer, until I could no longer tell if I was hearing the breeze outside or the echo of it inside me. My thoughts had grown faint now, like shadows of words, rather than words themselves. They came, but they did not stay. They drifted. They dissolved. I no longer tried to hold them. I simply let them follow the rhythm of the breeze, arriving, lingering, fading. The lullaby of the night repeated itself endlessly, and I allowed myself to repeat with it. A whisper, a ripple, a breath. A whisper, a ripple, a breath. Softer each time, slower each time, until the night and I were the same, until there was nothing left but the sound of rest itself. The moonlight, once sharp and clear upon the water, began to blur at the edges. What had shimmered like silver glass now softened into a hazy glow, shapes slipping from their outlines. The lake no longer looked like a mirror, but like a slow breath, rising and falling in silence. Each reflection bent and stretched, dissolving into shadow, until it was no longer clear where light ended and darkness began. I felt my eyes soften, as though they no longer needed to grasp each detail. What was before me was not something to hold, but something to drift into. The ripples that touched the moon's face smoothed away, leaving only faint glimmers that wavered, then vanished. It was as though the night itself was erasing its own edges, preparing to fade into something even quieter. I noticed my thoughts had begun to move the same way. At first distinct, like small stones resting at the surface of my mind, they slowly lost their shape, dissolving into a mist that drifted outward. I could no longer tell where one thought ended and the next began. They blended into one another like the moonlight blending into water, forming something soft, ungraspable, dreamlike. The world seemed less defined. The swan, once luminous against the dark, had become only a pale blur, floating without weight. Trees at the shoreline, once crisp in shadow, melted into softer lines, their edges swallowed by the night. Even the stars above seemed to blur, as though their light was stretching outward into endlessness. It felt as though I were resting between two worlds, one of waking, one of dream. I drifted in the space between, not needing to choose, not needing to move. My breath came slowly, evenly, and with each exhale, my body sank further into stillness. The grass beneath me was steady, the air above me was cool, and between the two, I felt suspended, carried, as though I too had become a reflection dissolving on the lake. The water itself seemed less like water now, and more like a veil of shadow and light, trembling gently, waiting to disappear. I watched it blur, then fade, then return in a softer form. My awareness followed, blurring, fading, returning again, but always lighter, always gentler, as though it was teaching me how to dissolve with it. Images drifted in and out without shape. A silver feather, a dim lantern, a path of clouds, but none of them stayed. They rose, wavered, then melted into the same blur of moonlit shadow. I let them come and go without grasping, without naming, only allowing them to pass like currents of water around me. My breathing matched this rhythm, slowly rising, slowly falling. Each breath, another ripple spreading outward before fading back into stillness. I was no longer just watching the lake. I was part of it, a reflection dissolving back into the dark, weightless and calm. Sentence by sentence, even my thoughts became slower, shorter, like the pauses between heartbeats. Images stretched, softened, dissolved. I was drifting outward, gently, as though the night was carrying me deeper into its arms, deeper into its shadows, where no edges remained. And in this dissolving, there was only peace. The swan had grown so still upon the water that it seemed less a living creature and more a drifting piece of moonlight itself. Slowly, with a grace beyond words, it curved its long neck and nestled its head beneath the soft whiteness of its wing. The gesture was unhurried, complete, the quiet surrender of one who trusts the night to hold it. The ripples that had followed its movements disappeared into silence until the lake became again a mirror of stillness. The swan floated in perfect repose, a luminous shape upon the dark surface, untouched by time. I watched with a reverence I could not place into words. There was something eternal in the way it rested, as though all of nature leaned toward the same truth, that rest is the natural rhythm, the soft ending to every motion. The swan breathed, though I could not hear it, only imagine the rise and fall beneath its folded wing. The swan and I, both cradled by the same night air. My heartbeat slowed, steady, echoing faintly in the quiet of my body. Each pulse felt softer, further apart, as though even my blood was surrendering to stillness. I let myself notice the weight of my limbs, the heaviness in my hands, the calm sinking of my legs into the grass. My body mirrored the swan's repose, each muscle loosening, each thought softening, until I too was folded into the quiet embrace of night. The world had narrowed into simple things: breath, heartbeat, stillness. No need for words, no need for thought, only the presence of the swan resting in the dark, and my own body answering its call to sleep. The swan became less an image and more a symbol, a shape of sleep itself, floating across the water. Its folded wings were the blanket, its silence the lullaby, its drifting the gentle passage into dreams. I felt myself dissolving into that same rhythm, as though the swan was leading me into a deeper quiet, showing me how to let go, how to trust the water beneath, the sky above, and the silence around. Breath by breath, moment by moment, I mirrored it. A soft inhale, a softer exhale, the rise, the fall, the swan, the sleeper. No division between us. The lake held us both, the swan upon its surface, myself upon its shore, and above, the moon poured its silver blessing, not to wake, not to stir, but only to shine gently, like a dream already begun. Time slipped away, unneeded. My awareness loosened, drifting with the swan into a space beyond thought, beyond shape. In the perfect stillness, I closed my eyes, and like the swan upon the lake, I too tucked myself into the soft curve of night, letting its calm carry me, weightless and safe, into sleep. The moon lingered above me, vast and gentle, watching as though it had always watched, through countless nights and countless lifetimes. Its silver glow poured quietly across the lake, across the swan, across my resting body, until everything seemed gathered beneath its patient gaze. The light did not press or dazzle. It simply spread, soft as a hand laid over my brow, cooling, calming, endlessly tender. I felt it tracing along my shoulders, my arms, the slow curve of my breath. It was not the brightness of day, but something quieter, something that did not stir, but soothed. The moon seemed less a distant orb and more a guardian, leaning close enough that I could almost feel its presence, as if it wished to cradle the whole of the night in its care. Its silver touched every ripple of the water, every blade of grass, every silent feather on the swan's folded wing, and all of it felt safe. I breathed into that safety. I let it hold me, the way water holds a drifting leaf, without effort, without condition. My chest rose, my chest fell, as the moon's light moved with me, a rhythm shared between earth and sky. Thoughts grew lighter, scattered like tiny sparks, dissolving almost before they formed. There was nothing to hold on to, nothing to resist. Only this silver presence above me, pouring itself out, asking nothing in return. I let my body grow heavier against the grass, knowing the moon would keep its watch. My limbs softened further, as though even my bones trusted the night enough to release. It felt as though the moon had gathered me into its wide embrace, stretching over water, over trees, over hills I could not see. Its silence was a lullaby, sung not with words, but with the gentle certainty of its glow. Each pause between, I surrendered to it, as naturally as the swan had surrendered to the lake. I did not need to move. I did not need to think. The moon was awake for me, so that I could close my eyes. The light shimmered across the still water, then across me, and then it seemed to move inward, filling the spaces of my mind with silver calm. Like waves, the glow drifted in and drifted out, in and out, until even those waves were almost nothing. All I could feel was trust. Trust in the night, trust in the silence, trust in the eternal gaze of the moon above. I let myself rest inside that trust, as though it were a bed made of sky. The swan floated in its dreams. The trees whispered their quiet sleep, and I too drifted into the moon's embrace, carried by its timeless light, unhurried, unending, at peace. Only fragments floated at the edges of my mind, thin as mist, fragile as the faintest dream. A ripple widening on the surface of the lake, then gone. A glimmer of silver, the soft curve of a feather drifting in moonlight, then fading. A scatter of stars above, shining faintly as if through a veil, then dissolving back into the dark. Each image lingered just long enough to be touched by awareness, then slipped quietly away, leaving only stillness behind. The more I tried to hold them, the softer they became, until they were no more than impressions, like echoes that scarcely belonged to sound. Between them, there was only silence, spacious, deep, and endless. I breathed into that silence, in a soft pause, then out, slower still. The rhythm was hardly my own anymore. It was as though the lake itself was breathing through me, calm and unhurried, carrying me further away from thought. The ripples, the feathers, the stars, they came like gentle visitors, and they departed without a trace. I let them pass. I did not follow. I simply rested, a body among bodies, a breath among breaths, dissolving into the quiet of the night. Time no longer felt like a river flowing forward. It was more like a still pool where nothing needed to move. Moments rested upon moments, almost indistinguishable, like dewdrops merging into one. A faint shimmer of moonlight blurred across the water. A cool current of air touched my cheek, the whisper of grass bending in the breeze. Each one arose, and each one fell away. In their absence, the spaces between grew larger, longer, softer, as though the night was teaching me to linger inside the silence, not to reach for anything, not to cling. I felt myself growing lighter and heavier at once, light in thought, heavy in body. My limbs belonged entirely to the earth now, sinking into the quiet ground, while my mind floated just above, like a drifting feather, fragile in the air. The last clear thoughts arrived slowly, as if wrapped in gauze. A memory of a river I once sat beside, its current slow and shining. A distant image of lantern light trembling on still water. The curve of a horizon that may have been real, or may have been dreamed. Each memory, each thought, softened almost as soon as it appeared, melting into the darkness. Soon, even these fragments grew thin. They stretched out like threads across silence, then dissolved, leaving only the hush of breath, the steady weight of night. I felt the edges of myself blur, as if I were no longer entirely separate from the water, or the air, or the silver watch of the moon. I was part of the same stillness, the same vast quiet, and then almost nothing. Only the faintest glimmers, like sparks before they fade. A ripple that was barely seen, a star that was barely felt, a feather that dissolved before it touched the ground. Then silence again. Silence, soft and infinite, waiting to cradle me into sleep. Everything is still. Everything is safe. The swan rests, its wings folded, its body a quiet shadow upon the silver water. No ripple moves around it now. No stirring breaks its peace. It has become part of the stillness, as natural as the moon above, as endless as the night. The lake rests, wide and calm, its surface holding the reflection of stars like fragile lanterns. Nothing disturbs it. Nothing asks it to change. It simply lies there, a mirror of silence, a cradle of light. And I rest, my body heavy upon the soft earth, my breath slowed into a rhythm that matches the night. Each exhale lengthens into stillness. Each inhale draws in the cool peace of the air. I am held here, safely, quietly, without need for thought or motion. Everything is still. Everything is safe. The moon above watches, tender and patient, its light a hand upon the world. It does not waver. It does not leave. It shines as it has always shone, carrying the same calm across countless nights, across countless lives. Its glow gathers around me like a blanket, soft and silver, steady as breath. The trees are still. The water is still. The air is still. Only the faintest murmur of night remains, the hush of distant insects, the occasional sigh of the reeds. But even these sounds are woven into silence, gentle as a lullaby. Everything is still. Everything is safe. The swan dreams in its resting place. The lake dreams as it reflects the sky. I dream, though I have not yet drifted away. All of us together, dreaming in the embrace of the moon. The night holds us, carries us, protects us. Everything is still. Everything is safe. Time no longer moves. There is no past, no future, only this wide and endless moment. A breath, a pause, a soft surrender. The earth beneath me is steady. The air around me is tender. The sky above me is eternal. I feel myself melting into this stillness, as though I were another ripple fading into the lake, another star dissolving into the dark, another feather drifting slowly down. Everything is still. Everything is safe. The swan sleeps. The lake sleeps. I sleep. And the night continues, vast, quiet, unending. It cradles all that lives within it. It holds everything in rest. Everything is still. Everything is safe. Everything is still. Everything is safe.